Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new episode of Southern Woke.
I'm Marina.
And I'm Kaylin.
Welcome back, you guys. Since our last episode, we hit a really big milestone. You want to tell them what it is?
Y'all, we hit 10,000 downloads and we cannot thank you all enough. Yeah. I know we've been keeping y'all updated along the way, but 10,000 was our big goal that we've hit so far. And we just can't thank y'all enough.
Yep, keep it coming, you guys. Tell your friends of your friends, your co-workers, your family, everyone. Let's get those views up.
I was just telling Marina that I was sitting in class today with my Southern Woke screensaver on, letting everybody that sits behind me see free advertising.
Yep. Hopefully it works. I might have to change my background.
Do it. Alright y'all, so we're doing something a little bit different today. Normally we cover like conspiracies or crime cases. Well, today we want to cover something a little bit more current, something that's being talked about in the news a lot, and that is this stuff going on in Afghanistan. And I know that at first, or until I started doing research for this, I keep hearing a lot about Afghanistan, but with being in school and being really busy, I haven't really had time to fully sit down and understand everything until today. So we kind of figured that a lot of y'all were probably in the same boat as us, so we decided to kind of break down everything that's going on for y'all.
Yep, and we're talking everything from like the history of where all this tension began. We're going to be talking about 9/11 and how America got involved in all of this. So we're going to go through a little history lesson and talk about current events today with you guys.
Alright, so let's get started. So who are the Taliban first and foremost? So to even understand who the Taliban are, you need to understand what happened to Afghanistan in the 1980s. So Afghan guerrillas called the Mujahideen, I am saying that so wrong, I am sure, but they had been fighting against Soviet occupation of Afghanistan for years. And in 1989, the Soviets ended up pulling out of the country, and the country was pretty chaotic. It was just complete lawlessness. There was all these little bitty groups growing up on the streets that were trying to take over the country, and there was no real stable government. And it's pretty crazy to think about that, because in the United States, I feel like we have always had, like a very straightforward government. There's never been like somebody else is taking over. Like, that'd be so crazy. Like, imagine somebody else just coming in and taking over our government. We don't have our normal leaders anymore. It's like this new group running the country.
Yeah, we've never had to experience a dictator, thank God.
Seriously. We take some of our freedoms for granted. But anyway, there was all these little groups trying to rise up to see who would take over now that the Soviets ended up leaving. And by 1992, there was a full-blown civil war happening in Afghanistan, with tribal leaders all fighting for power. And then 2 years after that civil war started, there was a group that started to become formed called the Taliban, and they were really getting attention. They had their own plans for the country, and their main goal was to capture the main city of Kabul and announce that they wanted an Islamic government there, to be completely Islamic, ran with Sharia law.
Yeah, and a big part of like the Soviet-Afghan war was that the U.S. had like aided them. Did you mention that?
Mm-mm.
That they aided them, like weapons and stuff. So I feel like that's, as far as I could see in the history of Afghanistan, I think that's the first time like America stepped in and like helped them out to conquer the Soviets or to kick them out.
It's really weird that like I feel like we didn't learn about that part of history either.
I know, because like when you think about it, okay, so like 9/11 happened, I think I was like in first grade. So like before that, the Taliban had only been in Afghanistan for about a decade. So that wouldn't even really make it to our history books. And even in our history classes when we're growing up, it barely reaches the point where we're in a current history, like what's going on at that time. So it makes sense why we never learned about it, but it's kind of because like it was really flaring up as we were growing up, I guess.
Well, the people and the citizens of Afghanistan were getting frustrated with the constant lawlessness, as they should be. Imagine there's no way to enforce laws and rules when you don't have an actual government. So somebody could come into your store, rob you, they could kill your family members, and there's nobody to enforce it, because you gotta think, there's not courts going on, there's no police, because who are they serving? There's no government. So everybody was tired of this constant lawlessness. And that's when the Taliban kind of came in. They came in and they said, hey, we can make your city safe for you again. they kind of became this force of hope almost for the Afghan people. And by 1996, the year I was born, the Taliban had seized the capital of Afghanistan. They immediately came in and took over and became the government, which I didn't even know that the Taliban controlled Afghanistan at one point in time until I started reading about this.
Well, yeah, I didn't know until recently either, but...
Do you have anything else on that before I don't want to skip too fast past what you're at.
No, because mine goes into 9/11, but some terms that I want to kind of iron out, because all these terms, like all these places, all these names, I get so confused, and I still kind of need to like straighten it out in my mind. So let's go over some of our like key players in the story leading up. Okay, so we have the Taliban, and we have Al Qaeda, and we also have it's only those two, I think. And then Al Qaeda was formed in Pakistan and was like Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
And then the Taliban was focused in Afghanistan. Okay. Just so we're all straight, because like when those terms start coming up, I'm like, okay, where and who is with who, like. But then when it comes to the Taliban, I don't even know whose name to mention because there's so many different leaders that I've seen.
Yes, there is one main leader, and I have his name in here somewhere. We'll get to that.
Okay.
But that's also another thing. I guess I knew there was a difference between Al Qaeda and the Taliban, but I feel like I probably am not that dumb for not knowing that. I bet a lot of y'all don't realize that as well, that there is a huge distinction between Al Qaeda and the Taliban. For some reason, I always thought when we were like at war with Afghanistan that we were really fighting against like the Taliban the entire time, and we truthfully weren't. We were really after Al Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, and we'll talk about that a little later on when we start talking about 9/11. But right before we get to the 9/11 part, in 1996 when the Taliban ended up capturing the capital and they had these promises of peaceful times, it didn't really go that way because they began to create oppressive laws, such as things like you can't watch movies, you cannot listen to music, women cannot go to school, other than doctors, they cannot even work. You had to wear certain clothes, men had to have a certain type of beard. They immediately began to enforce this Sharia law into Afghanistan culture, which they promised that they weren't going to do whenever they took over. Right, so just to keep everything straight right now, where we're at 1996, the Taliban is in control of Afghanistan, they rose up and they are the government, and then 9/11 happens.
Yeah, so basically, Osama bin Laden had inspired and funded attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in the U.S., and over like 3,000 people died, as we know. And it was like one of the worst things to happen in our lifetime. I feel like we should just take a moment and like, do you remember the day that it happened?
Yeah, I was going over the causeway with my parents.
What the hell were you doing? Because I was in school.
I was homeschooled.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I remember, I think I was in first grade-ish. I was in Metairie. And I remember, they brought us all into the cafeteria. Because I guess, I don't know, is this accurate? Every school went into, lockdown. Because they didn't know, who would get hit next. And, I remember my teachers, kind of whispering oh, New Orleans is a major port of things in America, so they could theoretically attack that and damage a bunch of imports and stuff. But I don't know why my little first grade brain remembers that. But anyways, I remember sitting in the cafeteria and they had this big TV that looking back at it now, I didn't know big TVs like that existed back then. But they had the news on, which probably isn't the best idea with a cafeteria full of kids, but I mean, at least we knew what was going on. And it was just terrifying, because we were just in lockdown all day, and then until our parents came to pick us up. But
that is terrifying, because that was the first time and the only time we've ever experienced our nation being under attack. That's a horrifying feeling.
The last time, I guess, before that would be Pearl Harbor.
I think so. We're gonna sound stupid if that's not true, but I'm pretty. That's gotta be right.
I know, and that was World War II.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I remember going home that day, and our neighbors, her brother was working there and died that day. I was like, what are the odds? And they immediately like moved back to New York. So I hope they're thriving. But anyways, let's get back to this. So the U.S. demanded that the Afghanistan leader Mullah Omar to hand over bin Laden and dismantle all militant training camps or face attack, because apparently like Osama bin Laden went into hiding in Afghanistan, and I guess like the Taliban were helping.
So
like,
the Taliban ran Afghanistan at the time. They like were the government.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, Osama bin Laden decided to hide there.
Okay, so then obviously they refused to hand over bin Laden. So
the reason they refused was they said they needed proof that he actually did the attack. Or that's what the research I said was. They were like, you have to give us proof first, and apparently the United States didn't like that too much.
Yeah, because then in like October of 2001, the president at the time, of course, was George Bush, and he made or signed the Bush Doctrine that stated America was officially at war with terrorism. And on October 7, 2001, the U.S.-led coalition launched the invasion of Afghanistan to find bin Laden and overthrow the Taliban. And then October 17th was the first American airstrike on Afghanistan, who was being ruled at the time by the Taliban, who were... I am repeating myself. Okay, but alright. Then we get to November. Taliban fled the capital, Kabul, for someplace else as the U.S.-led coalition marched into Afghanistan capitals with the Northern Alliance. And by December, the Bonn Agreement gave majority of power in Afghanistan to the Northern Alliance and named Hamid Karzai the Afghanistan president. And then January 2002, President Bush expanded the terrorist threats to Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, claiming they're all evil, which, I mean, he's not wrong for the most part. And then in 2003, we have the invasion of Iraq because they had weapons of mass destruction that they refused to hand over, and its ties between Saddam Hussein's Iraq and Al-Qaeda's 9/11 attack, so like they invaded Iraq. And then in March 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq and captured Baghdad, and Saddam Hussein was kicked out, and the dictatorship turned into a democracy, but that kind of fell apart later. And then I think it's so funny looking back at it now that in May of 2003, Bush announces mission accomplished and major combat is over. I guess, but like at this point, bin Laden's not dead. Like, they're still out there. So then in May 2006, the U.S. tried fighting through the insurgency happening in Iraq, but the Taliban reemerged and gained strength and began to reconquer lands in southern Afghanistan, and the U.S. concluded that Iraq had become a haven for Islamic. And that's where I left off rewriting my notes.
So let's just recap what we're talking about and what it means for the Taliban. So Taliban was keeping bin Laden in hiding. The U.S. didn't like that. So we literally invaded Afghanistan and forced the Taliban out of power. So that's like the first time that the U.S. is really fighting against the Taliban. And we're fighting against them to begin with, not because we wanted to take them out of power, but because they were sheltering the leader of Al-Qaeda, who we did not like. So that's why we originally started fighting against the Taliban to begin with. And as Marina said, we did force them out of power and ended up setting up a new government in Afghanistan. We set up a democracy there, which, of course, the Taliban wasn't happy about. A foreign government invaded them, pushed them out of power, and then set up a democracy. Obviously, they're not happy about that. And then it's just a mess with all the Middle Eastern countries over there, with Iraq, Iran, and the government the whole time. And like so many things have said, these wars were not just fought. It wasn't like you had one side just fighting against another side. It was all these small little groups and people on the street. You can't look at somebody and say, hey, that's Taliban. One person might look like just a normal Afghanistan citizen. One person may be a Taliban. It's really hard to differentiate between the two. So these wars that were going on weren't easy. It wasn't even easy to say if we were winning the war or losing the war, because
I know, that's one thing, like, looking back at growing up, like, I just knew there was a war going on. We always have a name for a war. Do we have a name for this war? Is it just a...
I don't want to say this, like, there's no way that's what it is, and I'm not even going to say it.
Yeah, like, it just always seemed like something that was going on.
It's the war on terrorism, right? Like, that's what we called this.
I mean, that was what the Bush Doctrine kind of declared it. But who knows? History will tell us, I guess. The war of... I don't know, because, like, so many people are involved. I feel like at this point, it just seems like in the Middle East, there's just always been this unrest. There's so many, like, little countries out there. So, like you said, like, just so many groups. I don't understand why. I mean, I guess it just goes back to, like, their religion.
Yeah.
Like, why they think they should rule this way. Like, they really take an eye for an eye seriously.
They do, and that Sharia law it's no joke. That's the type of law that if you steal, you get your hand cut off.
If you're a murderer or an adulterer, you get publicly executed.
Yes, they do stonings. They do all those type of harsh punishments that you hear about in countries like Saudi Arabia, etc. And a lot of the Afghanistan people didn't want that, especially if they weren't Islamic, which the majority of them are, but there's like different sects of Islam. And a lot of them were not down for all of that craziness. So when the United States came in and set up that democracy, there was a lot of Afghanistan people that were really happy. We set up a president. They actually had a democratic elections. I saw a couple of videos of them carrying the huge crates full of their votes and stuff, and that was like one of the first times Afghanistan people actually were able to vote and make their voices heard. And it was pretty cool.
Didn't they, like, actually re-elect the guy that the U.S. made president when the U.S. went in? I think it was the same
It probably
guy.
was. I'm really not sure.
Because it kind of just, like, validated, like, okay, we're on a good track. They re-elected him.
But what is important to remember here, y'all, is the only reason why the Taliban were pushed out was because the United States invaded and pushed them out. And we have had troops, I know you've heard every single president talks about, I'm going to get the troops out of the Middle East. I'm going to take them, I'm going to bring them back home. It's on so many people's platforms when they're campaigning, bring our troops home. They say that all the time. And they're talking about those troops that are in Afghanistan. Because if we were, man, somebody's having fun outside.
I know. These people, man.
If we were to take our troops out of Afghanistan, there was this threat that the Taliban would overthrow it. The only reason we were still holding the city under democratic control was because we had U.S. troops stationed there. And the Taliban weren't happy about that. They wanted the foreigners out and they wanted back in. And what followed was years of devastating conflict. So, over the next couple years, after we set up a democracy in Afghanistan, more than 40,000 Afghanistan citizens were killed. More than 64,000 Afghan military and police were killed. And more than 3,500 international soldiers were killed. And these are not in, like, our invasion. This is what's happening after we had already set up a stable government in Afghanistan. Just because the Taliban kept striking back. They were not going to give up. And for years and years and years, up until the present, they continued to fight. The Taliban never gave up their pursuit of taking over the main cities. The U.S. alone spent almost $1 trillion. And despite all of that, the country still remains unstable and it is fighting. It's almost like no matter what we do there, it's not going to be good enough. There's always going to be somebody opposing what we're doing.
It makes me so depressed, like, thinking about it. Like, there are people in the Middle East that are born not knowing what the fuck they're about to get into. And it's so sad that, like, there's probably people over there, like, our age, that we could go up to, assuming we speak the same language, and, like, have a great conversation and make friends. And, like, those people over there that are just like us, just in a different country, or over there, like, fighting just to eat, to live, to not get shot on the street. Like, I saw this one report of this girl just walking home and the Taliban just took her out. Like, she was 12. Why? Like, why? What in your religion tells you to shoot this innocent girl?
Exactly.
And they're, like, terrified at all times that, like, oh, I'm gonna go. I don't even know if they can check their mail out there. Do they even get mail? I don't know. Like, just think about, like, being worried to, like, get shot if you go check your mail.
I was thinking about that when I was going over this, like thinking about how different our societies are.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are people. It's so easy to think like, oh, these are Middle Eastern people, but these are people just like you and I that have lives like you and I, emotions, dreams, aspirations, and they're living in just this so unstable of society that we can't even imagine because we're so used to the way things are in our Western societies.
Yeah, and even like on YouTube, I watch YouTube a lot, and there's this channel called Yes Theory, and it's like these younger guys that travel all around the world and just like do different things and have different experiences. And they went to one of the Middle Eastern countries, I want to say it was Afghanistan, and they had like little tour guides and stuff that were super nice people, and they were just showing them around their land and trying to tell them about the history that nobody talks about. And I'm like getting full body chills because like no one really knows anything about that land. Like it could hold so much history, and it does hold so much history, but the wars over there have ruined it all. Like they've destroyed so many historic monuments, so many statues, so much. And like these guys were just trying to show them like our country is beautiful. It's one of the most like mountainous lands in the world. Like it's incredible, but nobody can enjoy it. It makes me so sad. Like I'm fighting tears right now. I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, if y'all haven't like actually like looked into or seen videos of like what's happening on the streets of Taliban, you really should just give yourself a reality check, because it definitely gave me and Marina a reality check.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about, we haven't even got into what happened recently, what's all in the news right now. This was all just kind of some background. But as time continued going on and on, it's not like the Taliban threat was getting more and more contained. I see some charts, and maybe we can post some pictures of it on the Instagram for you guys, but it breaks down the state of, or the nation of Afghanistan, and it shows which sections are controlled by the Taliban and which sections are controlled by the nation of Afghanistan. And it's like half and half. And we're not even talking about this recent invasion of the Taliban that we see in the news right now. This was before it happened. The Taliban owned over half of the nation already, even with the United States troops in there. So just imagine like your state. We're in Louisiana. Imagine half of Louisiana is owned by a completely different government, and then half of it's owned by our government. And there's just these problems going on because nobody can agree. You have two different governments running the state at the same time. And that's kind of the state that we were in leading up to these affairs that are happening recently. The Taliban basically set up a parallel state. They have as many as 85,000 full-time fighters in training camps set up across the country, and the area they control was only constantly growing. And then another fact that I saw off of CNN that said whoever controls the roads in Afghanistan basically controls the country. So you can they only have a few like main roads that run through it, and if you control those roads, nobody can get in or out, you can't get supplies anywhere, you basically control the country. Mm-hmm. And the Taliban was also greatly strengthened by Pakistan, which is like right below Afghanistan, if I have my geography correctly.
I can't correct you.
I'm 99% sure it's like Pakistan's underneath and then Afghanistan's right on top. And Pakistan was giving weapons and money to the Taliban, strengthening them, which also hurt us. So, also as another funny fact, okay, it's not a funny fact, it's kind of a sad fact, 90% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan.
Really?
So that's where most of the funding for the Taliban comes from. They get their money from a bunch of different things, but they make and sell and transport heroin, and heroin is extremely expensive. So
everything makes sense now.
Yeah.
How did I not know that? Because like once you put drugs into the mix, the money and the like why they go so hard, it makes sense. They want to keep doing that. They want to keep getting their money from the heroin, and if anyone messes with it.
Yep.
But that's bad because heroin's bad, and it just all needs to go away.
So it's not like we're dealing with some organization that is poorly funded running around the streets. We're talking about the Taliban is wealthy, you guys. Like lots and lots of money to supply whatever endeavors that they need. And they had more money than the Afghan government even had at the time. And as I keep mentioning, the only reason there even was an Afghan government was because the United States had troops in there helping them to hold those main points.
Yeah. It says, like, we had a peace deal between the U.S. and the Taliban that started, I guess, around February of 2020, and the Taliban seemed to shift their tactics from complex attacks on cities to a wave of then targeted assassinations on Afghan civilians, including like the journalists, the judges, the peace activists, the women in power, anyone that suggested that the Taliban hadn't changed their extremist ideology and only their strategy. Like, the Taliban wanted the US to think they were, like, I guess, cooperating, but like anyone that was like saying that no, they're not actually doing that, they were gone. So it was like really heating up leading up in this year.
And also, when I think of the Taliban, for some reason, it's probably just because that's all you see on the news is the people running around with giant machine guns in their hands. The Taliban are very, very organized as well. They have their own form of government set up. They have leaders over finance, health, education, military, political, and cultural leaders. They had an actual government set up. It's not like there was just military bands running around doing crazy stuff. They had plans for the nation as well. They even ran their own courts. So sometimes something would happen and justice wouldn't be served in the Afghan courts, so people would bring them to the Taliban courts, and those were those kind of crazy execute you courts. But there was a large sector of Afghanistan people that wanted that because they felt like justice wasn't being served in their other courts. And the Taliban kind of used that as leverage to get more and more people on their side. They would come in trying to be the heroes, come into the Afghan countries and those telling them, hey, y'all don't have anything going on right now, look at the state that y'all are in, we are here to help. We promise y'all that if y'all let us take over your government, we will be here to help. And it had been about 20 years since the Taliban last ran the country when we invaded them, so I guess people kind of forgot how they treated them last time they were in charge, and people started voluntarily handing over their nations to the Taliban. And I didn't even know this because I had never even heard about this, but did you know that Donald Trump tried to strike a deal with the Taliban to start removing troops from the country, like within his last year of being president? I don't even remember hearing about that in the news. He was the first president that came really, really close to meeting with them. But right before he ended up meeting with the Taliban officials, there was apparently assassinations on U.S. citizens in Afghanistan, and he decided not to meet with them.
Dang, I did not know that.
So that was pretty crazy. Alright, so now we're going to talk about what we've been seeing in the news lately, about what's happening with Afghanistan, why is it everywhere in the news, what's going on. And I want to try to make this as unpolitical as possible. I don't want this to be biased, I don't want this to be a let's poop on Joe Biden for what he did side, but let's talk about the facts, what happened, and what we can look forward to after. So Biden made a decision that he was going to remove U.S. troops from Afghanistan.
And he wanted it done by 9/11
And
this
he
year.
wanted it done by 9/11 this year. They started pulling troops out at 3 a.m. on Friday, June 2nd. That's when the first wave of troops started leaving, so we're not pulling everybody out all at the same time. We're taking them kind of slowly, little by little. But we took a lot of troops away on June 2nd. Remember I said that there's two parallel states going on in Afghanistan. There's the nation that the United States created, and then there's that Taliban nation. Well, we started pulling away our troops that were supporting the Afghan nation, and the Taliban saw an opportunity, and they took it. They took it very quickly. And in Joe Biden's address to the American people, he even said, I'm going to be straight up honest with you guys. This happened way faster than we thought would ever happen. Within 45 days of us withdrawing troops, things went downhill very, very quickly. The Taliban regained their lost territory, and the country's government was unable to resist, or they didn't want to resist. The Taliban absolutely took over. Not only did they control all the land mass, they also controlled all the border crossings in and out of the country. The only way to get out of the country that they didn't control was, it's Kabul, right? Am I saying that right? Kabul. I keep wanting to say Kabul for some reason. Kabul airport was the only route out of the country that was still open up. And that's what we've been seeing in the news lately, is people trying to flee the country that has now been taken over by the Taliban, and the only way to get out is through this airport. The U.S. was forced to intervene to try and allow people to get out of the country, and that's kind of where we are today. Also, as a fun fact, the Taliban generate nearly $20 million per month just from controlling the borders and taking bribes. So like before, if people were trying to get illegal things in and out of the border, they couldn't do it because it was under Afghan control. But with the Taliban controlling it, they're able to generate a lot of money by taking bribes and letting whoever they want get in and out of the country. And the capital of Afghanistan just recently fell to the Taliban as well, meaning that the entire nation of Afghanistan has fallen and is now under Taliban control.
Unfortunately, I cannot believe like the images that we saw in the news, like people literally clinging to an airplane. Like, I know there has not been an episode since I started watching Prison Break that I haven't mentioned Prison Break, but if you saw like the last season, there's this scene. It was like a country in the Middle East. I think it was Yemen. I think it was based in. I don't know, but some country over there, and like whatever military group had taken over, and the prisoners escaped, and everyone's just going to the airport, and like the same scenes that I saw in Prison Break like weeks ago were happening on live TV, and I was just like, this does not even feel like real life that this is happening in our world. And I hate that we feel so dissociated from the rest of the world sometimes because we're privileged in America.
So the video that Marina's referring to, there's a video out there right now of a plane leaving the airport, and there's people clinging to the side, like the outside of the plane as it takes off.
Yeah, like people died falling off.
And then they fall off like mid-air, and you can see the videos of these people falling off the side of the plane. Because they would rather take that chance of somehow surviving that, which obviously nobody would survive that, rather than staying under a government that's in Taliban control. So that shows there's at least a very large amount of people that do not want the Taliban in control and are fearful and scared. But that kind of puts the United States in this position because, and this is kind of where the arguments arise from, is it the United States' responsibility to stay and set up the nation of Afghanistan? Or was it our job to pull our troops, our United States citizens, out of there because we've been in a war for so long and it seems like nothing's getting better? And that's kind of what's going on in the media right now with this big debate. Should we have taken our troops out? If we kept our troops there, this probably wouldn't have happened. The Taliban probably wouldn't be in control. But also, U.S. citizens are constantly dying and they're protecting Afghanistan, and we're not gaining anything out of it. We're putting our life on the line for that. So that's kind of where this whole debate's coming from right now.
It would be so easy if we could just like take all the people that don't want to live that way out. Give these people that will not change their views on life, like they won't change it, give them their own little piece of country where they can rule, they can do their own thing, they can have their public executions, it's part of their stuff. But like the people that don't want to be involved, let them leave. Like innocent people that don't want anything to do with that are just born into that nation, should have a say, but like they're so controlling, there's no getting through to them. It's like they're all Tauruses over there. You can't get through to them. They're stubborn.
And that's exactly what we're struggling with right now. We're trying to let the people that want to leave out. The United States is trying to negotiate with the Taliban, which it's so weird because we're trying, like governments around the world, like Russia, the United Kingdom, the United States, are trying to decide if we're even going to recognize the Taliban as like a government leader, like an entity. Like, are we going to say, like, hey, Taliban, y'all are the nation's leader now. Like, we're going to start recognizing y'all as the leaders of Afghanistan. And we're trying to make... We don't even know if we can trust them. We're trying to come up with, like, treaties saying, hey, let everybody out of the country and safely when they want to. But we don't even know if we can trust them to do that.
But then say we do let the Taliban rule something just to let it be. Then they're going to go make their own alliances with Iraq or Pakistan or North Korea or Russia or just someone else that they could partner with and make the world a living hell.
And we know good and well the Taliban hate the United States. I have seen, and this is disgusting, and I will just be straight up honest about this, there are Taliban sympathizers out there in the United States that are sympathizing with the Taliban, that are saying we shouldn't be doing this, that it is wrong to go against their religion and stuff like that. Let me just be very clear. You are an idiot if you're saying stuff like that. The Taliban holds up signs saying death to the United States. We're not sympathizing with the Taliban. They are an awful organization. So I don't have sympathy for that. Like, this is a national threat. You're not going to be saying, oh, let's support the Taliban when they invade the United States and cause something like 9/11 to happen.
It's honestly really scary, because, like, not to be, like, political about it, because, like, I really don't give a damn about who is in office, but what they're doing. And, like, I don't know, like, can we, like, we see how Joe Biden is acting. It's not the most healthy. Like, who is behind the scenes making decisions? Like, what is their agenda? And are they gonna just, like, I feel like you can't underestimate the Taliban, obviously, because when you start pulling troops out, I guarantee you they had a game plan years ago for the exact day that America was ready to withdraw troops. They were fucking ready. They did not waste time. I think it took them 10 days total to conquer all that they conquered up to now. Like, and imagine if they invade a country next to them. India is right next to them. What if in some messed up dystopian world, like, they invade India, then we have a huge problem. Like, anything could happen with the Taliban ruling, and that's so scary. There's no, like, oh, let them be, because they're going to be doing something to plot some kind of destruction. And it's like, why? Why do you live to just cause fear?
Yep.
What is the purpose?
This is a Muslim extremist group. We're not talking about, like, Taliban 2.0 or Taliban reformed, like some nicer version, y'all. These are the same exact people that we were at war with, and they are now ruling a country. This is a very, very scary thought, and so we're trying to do everything we can right now to get everybody out of that nation that we can. From the most recent report that I saw, and as we're recording this right now, this is August 25th, so by the time this releases, there might be new updates, but from like an hour or so before I recorded this, according to CNN, there's at least 4,100 U.S. citizens still in Afghanistan right now that we are trying to get out of there. As far as we know, the Taliban have been keeping the roads open and letting people escape, but recently they're not letting Afghan citizens out. They're saying if you are from a different nation, you can still get to this airport and get out, but they recently decided that if you're an Afghan citizen, you are not leaving the nation.
And then there was all that stuff where, like, the president fled with, like, all that money.
That's another thing. So
I didn't really read a lot about it, because, like, when I check the news, it's usually, like, in the morning I wake up, I check the news, and honestly, I don't like starting my day with war.
Agreed.
So I kind of skip over those articles, and so I eventually just don't really get around to reading them. But I saw the headline about it. Do you know anything, like, further?
So, the Afghan government is not amazing. It's not rainbows and butterflies. Let me not say that by any means. There's a lot of corruption. It's a new government, guys. It was set up very recently, set up in wartime, and it's constant fighting. It is a corrupt government as well, even with United States assistance. It's still kind of messy. They had an army of like 300,000 people in their army. The Taliban's estimated to have around 80,000 people. So you're like, okay, how is this happening? How are they getting taken over? So
keep in mind also, Afghanistan's population in total is around 37 million.
Yeah.
That's whoa.
That is actually like really crazy to think about.
I know. It does not seem like that big of a land to support that many people.
But a lot of these Afghanistan military members didn't want to fight. They were tired of fighting. And then there's also this whole theory that there's not even near that many Afghanistan military members because there's something called ghost soldiers. Did you see anything about that?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, every single soldier gets paid a salary, and a lot of the soldiers ended up going missing. They're deserters because they had camps stationed so far away they could just get away with it. Nobody was really keeping track of them. So there's theories that like a very large number of their soldiers just left and aren't with the military anymore, but that the military was still paying them. So the generals are just taking all the money from their soldiers that they say are still working and they actually aren't. So that's why people are thinking that these ghost soldiers are making us think that the Afghan military was way stronger than it actually was. And then when things started going downhill, the president evacuated the country. And I don't know about him taking a lot of money with him. I mean, it really wouldn't surprise me, but he fled to a neighboring country and kind of left things. That's when we really knew that the nation was lost.
Yeah, like imagine if we get attacked and Joe Biden just goes to Canada.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Like, I'd be pissed. I kind of want to like look up what that actually was. Like, did he actually leave with all that money?
So this isn't an easy thing. There's not an easy solution either way. There's not a right or a wrong. There's it's so much gray space because there's so many different factors that go into this.
Yeah, this gets into way too much. Former Afghanistan president fled only with clothes on back. Where did the money thing come from then? Probably an unreliable news source, and that's why you have to fact check yourself, friends.
Alright, well that about brings us to where we're at today. So as of this exact moment, we are still trying to evacuate the airport. There are still many Americans that are stuck at the airport. According to the Pentagon, there's at least 10,000 people at the airport right now, which 10,000 people in an airport is ridiculous, waiting for evacuation. And this is the largest air evacuation in the history of the world to ever take place because these people are all being like air exported out of the country.
Ooh. I just typed into Google like updates of Afghanistan, and it says UK warns of high threat of terrorist attack around Kabul airport. At least 10,000 people are waiting for flight. Poland halts Afghan evacuations. Taliban have captured more than 100 military helicopters. This is, like, it's so crazy that this is really happening, but
a nation's been taken over by an Islamic extremist nation. And it's something that's actually happening in our world, and it's pretty crazy.
I did see one positive article that there was like this female robotics team in Afghanistan, and someone in America, I don't remember who, but some like politician or someone is like making sure they get to America, or they got to America. So like it kind of reminds me of the whole like Albert Einstein, when the war was going on, he fled to America, and then we got a great science. And like I hope these little Afghan girls like do great things with their robotics in America. If they made it here, I hope they did.
And that's another thing, y'all. The way that women are treated under Taliban rule is awful. You're basically throwing away every single right you have as a woman. And if you care about women's rights, then this is something you should care about, because these women are going to be treated awfully.
They don't even like allow them to go to school after the age of 10.
No.
Like they do not want them to have their own thoughts.
And they can't work. The only time they can work is if they're doctors. Otherwise, women just cannot work, and that's a form of control. It's a form of manipulation.
They can't work unless they're doctors, but they can't go to school past 10. What?
I don't even know. Maybe if you are a doctor, you can go to school past 10, but that's what the articles I was reading were saying.
Damn.
Alright, y'all. That's about all the information that we have. If there's more updates, we'll probably keep it updated on our Twitter or our Instagram. But we would love to hear y'all reach out and give us y'all's opinions on this. Because, like I said, I can see both sides. I can see the reasons for us taking troops out, but also I can see the reasons for us keeping troops in. Let us know what y'all think. And if there's any information that y'all find out that we didn't mention here, let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we can have like a fun little open discussion in the comments, you know. Keep it nice. But yeah, I think we're done for today.
Alright, y'all. Well, we will see y'all next week with a brand new episode. Make sure to follow us on all the medias, Twitter, Instagram, at Southern Woke Podcast, or you can follow my personal one at Kaylin Mercado.
And mine is Marina Renee.
Alright guys, as always, stay woke.